CNN has learned that the nation's top intelligence officials provided information to President-elect Donald Trump and to President Barack Obama last week about claims of Russian efforts to compromise President-elect Trump.
CNN learns the FBI is continuing to investigate an odd computer link between a Russian bank and the Trump organization.
You say there was a wiretap.
That there was a wiretap of Russian agents, and that those Russian agents were communicating with Trump staff. That's why they were picked up.
How do you know that?
That's what the intelligence community has told us. That's what's been reported very widely. Those are the facts.
Nobody was able to confirm what you guys have. That, number one, a FISA warrant was issued, correct? You're 100% sure.
We're 100% sure, yes. A FISA warrant was issued on the overall investigation into Russian hacking, and a separate warrant was issued to investigate the server that was registered to Trump Tower. When did Hillary know about it? Remember, she tweeted about it, and a Slate News magazine also wrote a story about it at the same time. She talked about these nefarious connections between Trump and Russia and his server, and then we had Harry Reid last October make those same claims. But remember, it was in October when the FBI opened their investigation into the server and closed it.
So now that we can confirm that there was in fact a FISA warrant issued and that there were wiretaps conducted on the Trump organization, we need to be able to link that to some sort of government body that would have conducted those wiretaps. And that brings us to this article from the New York Times. Secret court says FBI aides misled judges in 75 cases. The nation's secret intelligence court has identified more than 75 cases in which it says it was misled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and documents in which the Bureau attempted to justify its needs for wiretaps and other electronic surveillance, according to the first of the court's rulings to be released publicly. So this article is telling us that the FBI has a track record of misleading the FISA court so that it can wiretap individuals. This says that the FBI lies and that the FBI wiretaps individuals. So logically, this brings us back to the director of the FBI, who would have been aware that this agency was wiretapping the Trump organization and had brought forward misleading information to the FISA courts to warrant those wiretaps. The question we should be asking now is, would Comey do that? To answer that question, we just have to look back at his conduct during the congressional investigation into the Hillary server. Take a listen.
No, I think we'd have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt a general awareness of the unlawfulness of your conduct. You knew you were doing something you shouldn't do. And then, obviously that's on the face of the statute itself, then you need to consider, so who else has been prosecuted and in what circumstances, because it's all about prosecutorial judgment. But those two things would be the key questions. Can you prove that the person knew they were doing something they shouldn't do, a general criminal intent, general mens rea,
but the
way to treated other people similarly?
The way to prove that is whether or not someone took steps to conceal or destroy what they've done. That is the best evidence you have, that they knew it was wrong, that they lied about it.
It's very good evidence. Always want to look at what the subject said about their conduct.
So even though the FBI had evidence that Hillary had the intent to cover up her crimes by wiping her servers with BleachBit, and even though they said the intent was the determining factor on whether a crime had been committed, they chose not to pursue this case. They chose not to pursue a crime, which means they're part of a cover-up for political gain. Not surprising, given that Obama appointed Comey to the position of FBI director. Now the question that we should be asking here is, would somebody appointed by Obama conduct an illegal investigation into Trump and tap his phones for political gain? Of course he would. If Comey scuttled the obvious case against Hillary for partisan politics, he would obviously tap Trump's phone for partisan politics as well.
The FBI quietly dumping more Hillary Clinton emails. It happened last night while much of the public was busy watching the Packers versus the Giants. 300 pages of documents put out by the FBI showing Mrs. Clinton was regularly sending confidential and secret information to someone outside the government. And this evidence makes it clear that his last judgment on the matter of prosecution was utterly in error, does it not?
You're absolutely correct. This is the smoking gun if ever there was one. It ramps up the case for her prosecution to the point where Ironically, it may also ramp up the case for President Obama to issue her a pardon.
He doesn't really think that President Obama went up and tapped his phone personally. I think, but I think there's no question that the Obama administration, that there were actions about surveillance. The president used the word wiretap in quotes to mean broadly surveillance and other activities.
Judge Napolitano says even if the president, former President Barack Obama, his White House did spy on this president, there may never be a way to prove it. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. Here to explain, Fox News judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, what do you mean he can't prove it? I thought he could prove everything. We have all the American surveillance and technology at our fingertips.
Okay, so the statutes authorize the President of the United States to order the surveillance of any person in the United States of America without suspicion, without probable cause, and without a warrant, meaning he doesn't have to go to a court to do it. So he can order the NSA, which already has the digital version of our phone calls, to transcribe the digital version into a transcript and give it to him. But if he does that, there's a record of the order.
Right.
So 3 intelligence sources have informed Fox News that President Obama went outside the chain of command. He didn't use the NSA, he didn't use the CIA, he didn't use the FBI, and he didn't use the Department of Justice. He used GCHQ. What the heck is GCHQ? That's the initials for the British spying agency. They have 24/7 access to the NSA database. So by simply having 2 people go to them saying, President Obama needs transcripts of conversations involving candidate Trump, conversations involving President-elect Trump, he's able to get it. And there's no American fingerprints on this.
So you're saying that the British used their version of the CIA to wiretap Donald Trump's phone or
well,
tower?
It's not a wiretap. The concept of plugging a wire into a phone box in the basement of a building is what the law was when these statutes were written in 1978. Everything is done electronically now via computer. The NSA has 24/7, 365 access to every mainframe computer of every telecom and every computer service provider that does business in the United States. And they share that with various intelligence agencies, including the Brits. So the British intelligence agency had this. What happened to the guy who ordered this? Resigned.
Yeah, and just how big of a deal could this be? We want to bring in Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer for more on this. Good to have you here.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so this is all just breaking this morning, coming straight to us from the president, from his Twitter account. We don't have a whole lot of details here, but just on the surface, if this ends up being true, if this was the case, that the Trump Tower was wiretapped by, at that time, the sitting president, President Obama, how big of a deal would that be?
Oh, this is huge. I mean, this is Soviet, dare I say, Soviet-level wrongdoing. Look, President Obama has moved up to his Potemkin village and moved in Valerie Jarrett. We have to understand here. It's very likely that he did authorize this. And according to, I was on the drive-in just now. You guys called me a little bit late. Well, I was talking to folks on the drive-in. This goes back to July of last year when rumors started on the dark net that even though the Obama administration was getting pushback from the internal mechanisms of the administration, like the FISA court, and by the way, there's going to be a paper trail at NSA on this. And let me say, John Brennan's probably involved in this. You have to have kind of 3 people inside doing this. And I think what's happened here is the paper trail that President Trump is referring to has finally showed up. So let me be very clear. The FISA court thing that Brett Baird just talked about, that's one piece of evidence. I'm sure there's others out there. So what this indicates is that this is really the Obama administration was taking on the form using their version of the FSB, the KGB, to go and target a candidate. And let me be clear on this for your audience. Simply because you don't like someone does not give you the right as a sitting president to do something like this.
And when you, as a sitting president, as you know, you endorsed the opposing candidate in Hillary Clinton, you have a dog in the fight. I want to put another piece of evidence on the table, since the New York Times has been leading some of the coverage on all of this. I was just sent an article from January 19th, where the New York Times, right before the inaugural, was talking about the investigations into the Russia connections with Donald Trump, and there was a line tucked in there, quote, one official said, intelligence reports based on some of the wiretapped communications.
There you go.
Wiretapped communications had been provided to the White House. Again, Tony, January 19th, the White House then was Barack Obama. So is this the source? of some of these leaks. There have been massive leaks coming out of the FBI, maybe the CIA, alleging all of these different things. Did it come from those wiretaps?
This is the Trump Tower, to the best of the Obama administration's ability, was wired for sound. And yes, there was reasons why Mr. Trump did not want to give up his own personal security, because he knew that people, close to him may very well become collectors of this sort of thing. Look, this is completely insidious. This is an order of magnitude worse than Watergate, where you've actually used the mechanisms of state, the power of a state, to go after a candidate for presidency. And by the way, they presumed that he was going to lose, so it wasn't even about him winning or losing. This was about trying to gain advantage for his side, in this case, Ms. Clinton. And again, let me be clear on this. This is, while the Democrats keep talking about the Russians, this is Soviet behavior. This is the very thing the Soviet Union would have engaged in back during the Cold War.
Colonel, what would have been the cover, the official cover for this surveillance, though? Because they wouldn't come out and say, okay, let's just surveil the opposite candidate. They'd say, okay, we've got evidence that we need to surveil. What are they surveilling on?
They're surveilling on, in this case, probably quote-unquote international contacts which relate to business transactions. Again, projection. We know for a fact the Clinton Foundation was indeed taking foreign money. A lot of people are...
Physically, where were Hillary Clinton's servers?
The operational server was in the basement of her home in New York. The reason I'm answering it that way is sometimes after they were decommissioned, they were moved to other facilities, storage facilities, but the live device was always in the basement.
Was that an authorized or unauthorized location?
It was an unauthorized location for the transmitting of classified information.
Is it reasonable or unreasonable to expect Hillary Clinton would receive and send classified information?
As Secretary of State, reasonable that the Secretary of State would encounter classified information in the course of the Secretary's work.
Via email?
Sure, depending upon the nature of the system. To communicate classified information would have to be a classified rated email system.
But you did find more than 100 emails that were classified that had gone through that server, correct?
Right, through an unclassified server, correct.
Yes. So Hillary Clinton did come to possess documents and materials containing classified information via email on these unsecured servers, correct?
That is correct.
Did Hillary Clinton lie?
To the FBI? We have no basis to conclude she lied to the FBI.
Did she lie to the public?
That's a question I'm not qualified to answer. I can speak about what she said to the FBI.
Did Hillary Clinton lie under oath?
Not to the FBI, not in a case we're working.
Did you review the documents where Congressman Jim Jordan asked her specifically, and she said, quote, "There was nothing marked classified on my emails, either sent or received," end quote?
I don't remember reviewing that particular testimony. I'm aware of that being said, though.
Did the FBI investigate her statements under oath on this topic?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think there's been a referral from Congress.
Do you need a referral from Congress to investigate her statements under oath?
Sure do.
You'll have one. You'll have one in the next few hours. Did Hillary Clinton break the law?
In connection with her use of the email server, my judgment is that she did not.
Did you just not able to prosecute it, or did Hillary Clinton break the law?
Well, I don't want to give an overly lawyerly answer. The question I always look at is there evidence that would establish beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody engaged in conduct that violated a criminal statute? And my judgment here is there is not.
The FBI does background checks. If Hillary Clinton applied for the job at the FBI, would the FBI give Hillary Clinton a security clearance?
I don't want to answer a hypothetical. The FBI has a robust process in which we adjudicate the suitability of people for employment in the Bureau.
Given the fact pattern you laid out less than 48 hours ago, would a person who had dealt with classified information like that, would that person be granted a security clearance at the FBI?
It would be a very important consideration in a suitability determination.
You're kind of making my point, Director. The point being, because I injected the word Hillary Clinton, you gave me a different answer. But if I came up to you and said that this person was extremely careless with classified information, the exposure to hostile actors, and used, despite warnings, created unnecessary burdens and exposure. If they said that they had one device and you found out that they had multiple devices, if there had been email chains with somebody like Jake Sullivan asking for classification changes, you're telling me that the FBI would grant a security clearance to that person?
I hope I'm giving a consistent answer. I'm not saying what the answer would be. I'm saying that would be an important consideration in a suitability determination for anybody.
And it's just, personally, I just think that sounds like a bit of a political answer, because I can't imagine that the FBI would grant a security clearance to somebody with that fact pattern. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Just say what I said before. Again, it's very hard to answer in the hypothetical. I'll repeat it. It would be a very important consideration in a suitability determination.
Did Hillary Clinton do anything wrong?
And what do you mean by wrong?
I think it's self-evident.
Well, I'm a lawyer, I'm an investigator, and I'm, hope, a normal human being.
Do you really believe there should be no consequence for Hillary Clinton and how she dealt with this?
Well, I didn't say, I hope folks remember what I said on Tuesday. I didn't say there's no consequence for someone who violates the rules regarding the handling of classified information. There are often very severe consequences in the FBI involving their employment, involving their pay, involving their clearances. That's what I said on Tuesday, and I hope folks walk away understanding that just because someone's not prosecuted for mishandling classified information, that doesn't mean if you work in the FBI, there aren't consequences for it.
So if Hillary Clinton, or if anybody, had worked at the FBI under this fact pattern, what would you do to that person?
There would be a security review and an adjudication of their suitability, and a range of discipline could be imposed from termination to reprimand, and in between suspensions, loss of clearance. So you could be walked out, or you could, depending on the nature of the facts, you could be reprimanded. But there is a robust process to handle that.
I've gone past my time. I yield back. Now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Director Comey. Secretary Clinton said she never sent or received any classified information over her private email. Was that true?
Our investigation found that there was classified information sent.
So it was not true?
Right. That's what I said.
Okay. Well, I'm looking for a little shorter answer, so you and I are not here quite as long. Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails, either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true. There were a small number of portion markings on, I think, 3 of the documents.
Secretary Clinton said, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out, something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
Secretary Clinton said her lawyers read every one of the emails and were overly inclusive. Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Well, in the interest of time, and because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements, but I am going to ask you to put on your old hat. False exculpatory statements, they are used for what?
Well, either for a substantive prosecution or for evidence of intent in a criminal prosecution.
Exactly. Intent and consciousness of guilt, right? Is that right?
Right.
Consciousness of guilt and intent. In your old job, you would prove intent, as you just referenced, by showing the jury evidence of a complex scheme that was designed for the very purpose of concealing the public record. And you would be arguing, in addition to concealment, the destruction that you and I just talked about, or certainly the failure to preserve. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent. You would also be arguing the pervasiveness of the scheme, when it started, when it ended, and the number of emails, whether they were originally classified or up-classified. You would argue all of that under the heading of intent. You would also probably, under common scheme or plan, argue the burn bags of daily calendar entries or the missing daily calendar entries as a common scheme or plan to conceal. 2 days ago, Director, you said a reasonable person in her position should have known a private email was no place to send and receive classified information. You're right. An average person does know not to do that. This is no average person. This is a former First Lady, a former United States Senator, and a former Secretary of State that the President now contends is the most competent, qualified person to be president since Jefferson. He didn't say that in 2008, but he says it now. She affirmatively rejected efforts to give her a state.gov account. She kept these private emails for almost 2 years and only turned them over to Congress because we found out she had a private email account. So you have a rogue email system set up before she took the oath of office, thousands of what we now know to be classified emails, some of which were classified at the time. One of her more frequent email comrades was, in fact, hacked, and you don't know whether or not she was. And this scheme took place over a long period of time and resulted in the destruction of public records. And yet you say there is insufficient evidence of intent. You say she was extremely careless, but not intentionally so. You and I both know intent is really difficult to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce, on this date, I intend to break this criminal code section. Just to put everyone on notice, I am going to break the law on this date. It never happens that way. You have to do it with circumstantial evidence. Or if you're Congress and you realize how difficult it is to prove specific intent, you will formulate a statute that allows for gross negligence. My time is out, but this is really important. You mentioned there's no precedent for criminal prosecution. My fear is there still isn't. There's nothing to keep a future Secretary of State or President from this exact same email scheme or their staff. And my real fear is this. It's what the chairman touched upon. This double-track justice system that is rightly or wrongly perceived in this country. That if you are a private in the Army and you email yourself classified information, you will be kicked out. But if you are Hillary Clinton and you seek a promotion to Commander-in-Chief, you will not be. So what I hope you can do today is help the average person, the reasonable person you made reference to, the reasonable person understand why she appears to be treated differently than the rest of us would be. With that, I would yield back.
Yes, I am.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Last weekend, everybody was talking about how Donald Trump tweeted out that it looked like Barack Obama had tapped his phones or something at Trump Tower. Yesterday, James Comey and the intel chiefs met with the congressional leaders and whatnot to find out if there's anything to that. What do you make of what's going on?
Well, you know, I think it's fascinating that these the politicians and you know, you kind of looking there are two sides to me. You know, there's a prosecution side and then there's the other side. As a prosecutor, I say, look, this guy is the head of the FBI. He doesn't have to tell any politician anything about any investigation that he's doing. And for all of you who think that, look, we'll keep it secret and we won't tell anyone, that's absurd. 5 minutes later, this thing is going to be on every television station. So there's very little that he can tell you, that he can, you know, that he can share with you if he's in the middle of a real investigation. However, what I find rather incredible is that James Comey, the man who couldn't wait to get in front of a camera that were done with Hillary or no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute her. I guess I'm not reasonable, although I would have prosecuted her in a minute, Jim. But then comes back and he says, well, we're reopening the case. why does he need the Department of Justice to push back on his new claim that we didn't wiretap anybody? I mean, this guy isn't afraid of a microphone.
Well, there's evidence. There's evidence.
You know, come right out and say it, Jim.
There's
because
evidence.
you said it indirectly.
There's evidence of others being surveilled as well. In fact,
And
Dennis
I don't
Kucinich,
doubt it.
Right, look at James Rosen, our own James Rosen. Dennis Kucinich came out. A reporter played a tape of a sensitive phone call that he had made with someone else at a restaurant, and he's like, "How did they get this?" This is what he says: "I can vouch for the fact that extracurricular surveillance does occur, regardless of whether it is officially approved. I was wiretapped in 2011 after taking a phone call in my congressional office from a foreign leader."
See, here's the question that I have. When the president tweeted that he was wiretapped, did he box himself into a corner so that they could say technically that he wasn't really wiretapped?
Taking it literally,
you know,
right?
literal. That, you know, maybe they had a bug somewhere as opposed to a wiretap. Maybe it was the terminology that they can deny. And this guy, Clapper, I don't believe a word he says, although he did say there's no evidence of collusion between Trump and the Russians. But, you know, this guy is also the guy who said, we don't wittingly surveil on Americans until we found out they do it every day, all the time, 24/7. So, you know, here's the thing. Do I think that they were looking at Donald Trump? Without a doubt, Barack Obama would do that in a second. He did it to James Rosen, apparently to Kucinich. This is politics. This is the dirtiest game in town.
Well, let's see what happens from it.
Well, speaking of a dirty game in town, unfortunately, on another network, Samantha Bee, a comedian, recently did a piece that we've been covering all morning here, where she mocked attendees of CPAC, saying that they sport Nazi haircuts. It just turns out she made a bit of a mistake. We're going to play the clip and get your reaction.
This venerable conference has long celebrated traditional small government conservatism. Just last year, CPAC was dominated by Ted Cruz supporters. CPAC! And chirpy little bow ties. This year, the bow ties were gone, replaced by Nazi hair. Nazi hair, Nazi hair.
That last gentleman there on the left, purportedly with a Nazi haircut, instead actually has stage 4 cancer, terminal cancer.
His sister tweeted out, when Samantha Bee makes fun of your brother for having Nazi hair, he actually has stage 4 brain cancer, but whatever floats your boat.
And this is, you know, a time for America to stop and think for a second. This is a moment where we finally can focus on not why, but the left demonizing anyone that they disagree with. They must be Hitler-like from the president on down. They must be a Nazi. They are so willing to go over the top and over the edge to make us anything that is negative, that is horrific. Yeah. And this poor young man with stage 4 brain cancer. It's brain cancer.
It is brain cancer, and it is terminal, and it's terrible.
Shame on them.
Sure. I got an email from somebody who said that a friend of theirs was there, and apparently the cameraman or the producer from that show said, hey, could you put solitaire up on your computer so that I could take a picture of you playing solitaire during the Donald Trump speech? Obviously, it was to make young conservatives look bad.
Stupid, right.
But you know who looks stupid now is Samantha Bee, because...
And all of them, they just want to hate and demonize.
It does make you, you're right, it makes you stop and think, okay, before you make fun of someone, before you go to the extreme, comparing him to Nazi because he goes to CPAC, he's a registered Democrat, by the way, and goes to conservative,
But it makes you stop and
think how negative and how nasty and how hateful people have become.
You know, the right was never like this. The Tea Party was never like this. People who didn't like Barack Obama didn't do this. This is, I think, the first time in our history that we have gotten to the point where the hate is so extreme that I worry for this country. I do.
I think they want to take God out of everything. We got to get back to that as a country. We need to start thinking of other people and loving other people.
Well, I'll tell you what, while the prognosis for this young man is grim, we have a little something for him something to smile about. He did establish a GoFundMe page. When we started, I believe it was less than $10,000, and right now he's up over
52,000. Oh, 54. That's not updated. We're hearing
$55,000. Most of it coming from all of you watching out there.
I hope he has enough money to pay for his bills and to do a little bit of fun things to check off the bucket list.
Yeah, absolutely, because the heart is there. But when you judge people just by a label or a haircut, that's where you make.
You know what? This is what you're looking at is the heart of America.
That's right.
We are good people. The people on the left who are demonizing us, they are not. I'm sorry. I'm done with them.
Well, she did apologize and give him
So what? She had to apologize.
Thank you for being here. You never
You believe that?
Listen,
I love it.
We're going to be watching it. She says with a smile. All right, Judge, we're going to be watching you this weekend.
Saturday and Sunday.
I love it.
Now, FBI Director James Comey was up on Capitol Hill meeting with key members of the House and Senate committees today. They spent about an hour with each committee member. I should say with the House and with the Senate to talk about all of these wiretapping allegations, as well as any developments with this ongoing investigation into Russian contacts with Trump advisors.
All right, Margaret, so what more can you tell us about that briefing on Capitol Hill by FBI Director James Comey, and what is the White House saying about it?
Well, the FBI director has not spoken publicly. He met behind closed doors, so we don't know the details of what he revealed in that meeting. But our own Jeff Pegues has reported, since he covers that department, that ever since Saturday and that flurry of tweets from the president, James Comey was upset because that allegation of wiretapping suggests either illegal activity on the part of the FBI or is speaking about an ongoing pretty sensitive investigation. So it put him in an awkward spot. According to CBS reporting, up to this point, he had asked the Justice Department to publicly refute these claims, that the Justice Department has not done so. So that is why the White House is saying from the podium, you know, you can ask the FBI director, but we can't answer the question of whether or not there's any investigation underway.
All right, Margaret, it's getting a lot of play across the board. You asked Press Secretary Spicer about those wiretapping allegations during Thursday's briefing. Tell us a little more about that exchange and what you made of it.
Well, yesterday, when we left the White House press briefing with Sean Spicer, he had answered in a lengthy exchange with me, something he then came back to clarify at the end, saying, as it relates to the Department of Justice, we have no reason to believe that there is a counterintelligence investigation or any investigation involving the president. His language was specific, it was scripted, it was handed to him at the conclusion of the briefing by another aide after he had initially said to me, we want to look into whether there's an investigation. So in his initial answer, he raised the prospect that there was one, and then in his final answer, he said there was no reason to believe there was one. After other reporters went to the Justice Department to say, because it would be unusual, did the Justice Department tell the White House, in fact, that's the case, that there's no investigation? The White House, when pressed on that today, which I brought up to Sean Spicer, said, no, actually, we gave that answer without knowing anything from the Department of Justice. So the definitive tone and phrasing used yesterday, turns out, was not based on any fact or information from the agencies doing the investigation itself. So it was basically acknowledged it was spin, and they don't know the answer of whether the president's under investigation or not.
Wow, which begs the question, where is the president on all of this?
Well, we haven't heard from the president. He hasn't spoken to reporters. He's only spoken in meetings with some prepared remarks over the course of the week. It's unusual because Donald Trump is so camera friendly. He has enjoyed having cameras in so many of his meetings over this first month in office to show what he's doing, who he's meeting with, all the leadership. He really wants to show how hands-on he is. So for the president to then pull back from that, have many of these meetings be closed press, not respond to reporters' questions, is very different behavior for him. And it's notable because we have also not heard the president follow up on those tweets, those allegations and accusations that he made on Saturday. Most of his direct communication over Twitter has been about the economy, been about health care, all the things on his agenda that you would think the press would be reporting on right now, but they are instead continuing to chase the thing that the president said he was personally so upset about on Saturday. So in some ways, the president has disrupted his own communications agenda with those tweets he sent out. He doesn't want us talking about this. He wants us talking about health care and other work. But he raised this incredible charge, which we're continuing to try to substantiate because, as the White House says, take the president at his word. So that's what we're trying to do.
All right, Margaret, we're also getting word that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is looking to appoint a special counsel to investigate Obama-era scandals. What is that about?
Well, it's interesting because the Attorney General just recused himself last week from any probe related to the campaign and Trump associates and contacts with Russia. And of course, Jeff Sessions did that because as a senator, he was part of that campaign. And so since he's removed himself from that investigation, he has also in the past been very resistant to the idea of appointing a special prosecutor or counsel to independently look into these issues related to Russian contacts with the campaign or Trump associates. So it's unusual for him to then embrace the idea of a special prosecutor or counsel today when it comes to Obama-era scandals. Now, what we know, there are a number of things that Republicans have long called for a special prosecutor to look into, whether it was scandals related to the IRS and documents disappearing or being lost, whether it comes to the so-called Fast and Furious scandal in regard to gun running cross-border with Mexico, whether it comes to Loretta Lynch, the former Attorney General, and her contact with Bill Clinton during the campaign when, of course, his wife was running for president, Hillary Clinton, and there was investigation related to her email use while Secretary of State and using a private server. So during the Obama administration, there were calls from Republicans for a special prosecutor. Now that you have Jeff Sessions, a Republican, in that job, he's saying, I want to look into that. But when it comes to some of these other issues with a special prosecutor on the Russia contact in the Trump White House, they've been resistant up to this point.
All right, let's go ahead and get to some new reaction now from Vice President Mike Pence about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn working as a, quote, a foreign agent on behalf of the government of Turkey before taking on his role at the White House. Here's what he had to say in an interview with Fox News late Thursday.
Hearing that story today was the first I heard of it. And I fully support the decision that President Trump made to ask for General Flynn's resignation.
All right, so Margaret, this is a much different response than what we've heard from Secretary Spicer. What's going on?
It's a very different response. Sean Spicer from the podium at the White House said, we weren't aware that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had worked as a lobbyist on behalf or in some capacity related to the government of Turkey. We know that he did because after the fact, just yesterday, he filed legal papers declaring himself as acting as a foreign agent for a government, that is Turkey. So that declaration and legal filing had not been made until he left the Trump administration. And Sean Spicer defended it and drew a line there saying, look, this work was not done while he was on the transition team or when he was in office. But the Trump campaign and then the Trump administration has drawn a line saying they want to drain the swamp. They don't want lobbyists in the government. They certainly don't want ones who have worked for foreign governments to do so. And yet the direct national security advisor to the President of the United States just admitted yesterday that he was acting as one. So what's unusual for Sean Spicer to say we were not aware is there was a lot of reporting done at the time during the campaign and afterwards about Michael Flynn's work that he had done on behalf of the Turkish government. So that term foreign agent sounds like it's something a little bit more mysterious. It's lobbying work that Michael Flynn said he carried out, and it matters because the Trump administration says they don't want lobbyists in the government and because it wasn't declared before he was in the White House.
All right, Margaret Brennan. Thank you, Margaret.
The House Intelligence Committee demanding answers by today. They want to know if there's any hard evidence to support President Trump's claim that President Obama had his phones tapped before Election Day.
First of all, is there information to be produced is one question. But more than that, we're going to have an open hearing on March 20th. We're going to be able to ask the director of the FBI, among others, is there any truth to this? Have they seen any evidence of this? They would be in a position to have to know. And I think on March 20th, if not before, we'll be able to put this to rest.
Michael Goodwin is a New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor and has written a lot about the man at the center of this, FBI Director Jim Comey. He will be in the hot seat. We believe at least part of this hearing will be public for him next week. Do you think he's enjoying being in the spotlight?
I'm afraid he does, though I'm not sure he likes the glare that he's getting lately. Look, when we look back, Shannon, one of the most remarkable things in American history will be that during the 2016 election, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were under some kind of FBI investigation or surveillance. Lots of stories, we know about the Clinton case, for example, but lots of stories have been written, including one that's in the New York Times, which said there were wiretaps on Trump associates. So something clearly was going on. The Flynn call was intercepted. The Michael Flynn call was intercepted with a Russian ambassador. Somebody knew that Jeff Sessions had met twice with the Russian ambassador, despite his denial in this congressional confirmation. So something went on in both campaigns, led by presumably the FBI, perhaps the CIA, others in the intelligence community. I think Jim Comey has a lot of explaining to do.
Well, you think he is, if not one of the most powerful FBI directors in our history?
Well, look, I mean, just that example that he had both presidential candidates under some kind of investigation at the same time. As they're battling for the White House, they're also battling him. That's extraordinary. I call him in my piece J. Edgar Comey. He had at least, if not more power than J. Edgar Hoover. And, you know, the Hoover example, I think, is instructive, too. Hoover stayed too long. 5 presidents confessed secretly that they wanted to fire him, but were afraid to. Harry Truman accused him of blackmail, and yet wouldn't fire him. He died in office. Richard Nixon named the building after him. It's the building that Jim Comey goes to work in every day. So I do think there is a sense of these guys being above the law themselves, being unaccountable to anybody. This 10-year term, Comey said, you're stuck with me. He doesn't intend to leave. I mean, that's an incredibly brazen thing to do. And then last week, when President Trump said that he had been wiretapped, Comey apparently went around the FBI and Justice Department demanding the Justice Department issue a denial. We only know that because Comey leaked it, or someone close to Comey. Everybody had the story that Comey was furious, incredulous, he had to stand up to Trump. I mean, who rebukes the President of the United States that way, off the record, and gets away with it? That's a mighty big move, and I think there's somebody there with a lot of power that is no longer accountable.
So where do you see this matchup? If it comes to a head between President Trump and the FBI director, how does that play out? Because you mentioned J. Edgar Hoover and 5 presidents wanting to get rid of him, but being afraid, and certainly if there are hints or confirmations that you as the president or those close to you are under some type of FBI investigation, not the best time from a PR stance to be getting rid of the FBI director.
But that goes directly to the point. I mean, should a president of the United States be afraid to fire an FBI director because the FBI director will spill the beans? I mean, that's an incredible moment. I mean, talk about blackmail opportunities. Talk about unaccountable power. I mean, I think that is what's wrong with this whole situation with the FBI, where there are so many leaks about investigations that are never put on the record. Nobody is ever held accountable. Did you ever hear of an FBI agent getting fired for leaking? So all of these things, much of this is classified material that gets leaked. How do we know that Donald Trump's campaign was wiretapped, that associates were wiretapped? Only through leaks.
Very quickly, I want to play a little bit of what Speaker Ryan had to say about the president bringing up these wiretap allegations and how that has impacted this fight over health care.
Did that help or hurt?
Yeah, that wasn't really part of the healthcare marketing campaign.
Yeah, how much off course did that take you?
Like I said, this is going to be an unconventional presidency.
Quickly, how much of that has been a distraction now, the wiretap allegations?
Look, I think if I had advised President Trump, I would have said, be careful when you do this and how you do this. And I think also personalizing it about President Obama, that does, I think, raise the level. And as Paul Ryan was saying, it sucked everybody into something else than what they were supposed to be doing, including the White House. But the cat is now out of the bag. The president has made the charge, and we are about to find out, I hope, whether there was any truth to it or what exactly, I would broaden it, what exactly was the surveillance and investigation of the Trump campaign? What did it find and what did it not find?
Yeah, and as we've talked about, the words and the precision that you use is very important in discussing these cases. All right, Michael Goodwin, good to see you.
Thanks
for coming out.
From Director Comey is they would say they've done nothing wrong. I find that interesting because that's exactly what Heather Samuelson and Cheryl Mills' attorneys said. In fact, they said it just a few days ago, and I'll quote it. The FBI considered my clients to be witnesses and nothing more. And then Ms. Mills and Ms. Samuelson's attorney said this. I think this is the most interesting part. The Justice Department assured us my clients did nothing wrong. Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're assuring subjects or targets or what witnesses, whatever you want to call them, that they've done nothing wrong, it does beg the question, what are you seeking and receiving immunity from? I mean, if you've done nothing wrong, laptops don't go to the Bureau of Prisons, Mr. Chairman. People do. So the immunity was not for the laptop. The immunity was for Cheryl Mills. And if the Department of Justice says you've done nothing wrong, it does beg the question of why you are seeking or receiving immunity. And it could be, Mr. Chairman, for a couple of different, it could be for the classified information that was the genesis of the investigation. It could be for the destruction of federal records, which came from that initial investigation, or it could be both. Mr. Comey, I want to ask you this. Did the Bureau interview everyone who originated an email that ultimately went to Secretary Clinton that contained classified information?
I don't think so. Nearly everyone, but not everyone.
Well, you and I had a discussion the last time about intent. You and I see the statute differently. My opinion doesn't matter. Yours does. You're the head of the Bureau. But in my judgment, you read an element into the statute that does not appear on the face of the statute. And then we had a discussion about intent. So why would you not interview the originator of the email to, number one, determine whether or not that originator had a conversation with the secretary herself?
There were a handful of people who the team decided it wasn't a smart use of resources to track down. One was a civilian in Japan, as I recall, who had forwarded something that somehow got classified as it went up. And the other were a group of low-level State Department people deployed around the world who had written things that ended up being classified. Nearly everyone was interviewed, but there was a small group that the team decided it isn't worth the resources.
Well, to that extent, if you interview the overwhelming majority of the originators of the email, will you make those 302s available to Congress? Because I counted this morning 30-something 302s that we do not have.
Okay. I'll go back and check. My goal is maximum transparency, consistent with our obligations under the law. I'll check on that.
Well, and I appreciate it for this reason. Intent is awfully hard to prove. Very rarely do defendants announce ahead of time, I intend to commit this crime on this date. Go ahead and check the code section. I'm going to do it. That rarely happens. So you have to prove it by circumstantial evidence, such as whether or not the person intended to set up an email system outside the State Department, such as whether or not the person knew or should have known that his or her job involved handling classified information, whether or not the person was truthful about the use of multiple devices, whether or not the person knew that a frequent emailer to her had been hacked, and whether she took any remedial steps after being put on notice that your email or someone who's been emailing with you prolifically had been hacked, and whether or not, and I think you would agree with this, Director, false exculpatory statements are gold in a courtroom. I would rather have a false exculpatory statement than a confession. I would rather have someone lie about something and it be provable that that is a lie, such as that I neither sent nor received classified information, such as that I turned over all of my work-related emails. All of that, to me, goes to the issue of intent. So I got two more questions, then I'm going to be out of time. For those who may have to prosecute these cases in the future, what would she have had to do to warrant your recommendation of a prosecution? If all of that was not enough, because all of that's what she did, if all of that's not enough, I mean, surely you cannot be arguing that you have to have an intent to harm the United States to be subject to this prosecution. I mean, that's treason. That's not a violation of this statute.
No, I think we'd have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt a general awareness of the unlawfulness of your conduct. You knew you were doing something you shouldn't do. And then, obviously, that's on the face of the statute itself. Then you need to consider, so who else has been prosecuted and in what circumstances, because it's all about prosecutorial judgment. But those two things would be the key questions. Can you prove that the person knew they were doing something they shouldn't do, a general criminal intent, general mens rea,
but the
and
way to
treated other people similarly?
The way to prove that is whether or not someone took steps to conceal or destroy what they've done. That is the best evidence you have, that they knew it was wrong, that they lied about it.
It's very good evidence. Always want to look at what the subject said about their conduct.
Well, and there's a lot. There's a lot. If you saw her initial press conference, it all falls under the heading of false exculpatory statement. I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but the director did. You started off by giving us examples of things the Bureau has done. And every one of us who's worked with the FBI, that is the FBI that I know. The one that went and saved that girl in North Carolina, that is the FBI that I know. What concerns me, Director, is when you have 5 immunity agreements and no prosecution, when you are allowing witnesses who happen to be lawyers, who happen to be targets, to sit in on an interview. That is not the FBI that I used to work with. So I've been really careful to not criticize you. In fact, I said it again this morning. They wanted to know, was he gotten to? Did somebody corrupt him? No, I just disagree with you. But it's really important to me that the FBI be respected. And you got to help us understand. Because it looks to me like some things were done differently that I don't recall being done back when I used to work with them. And with that, I would yield back to the chairman.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
I hope someday when this political craziness is over, you will look back again on this, because this is the FBI you know and love. This was done by pros in the right way. That's the part I have no patience for. Sorry, sir.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director.
5 minutes of questioning for doing so, so thank you very much. Director, thank you for your accessibility. You have been very readily available, and we do appreciate that. This investigation started because the Inspector General found classified information in a non-secure setting, and the FBI went to a law firm and found this information. They seized at least one computer and at least one thumb drive. Did you need an immunity agreement to get those?
It was not. I don't think there was immunity. In fact, I'm certain there was no immunity agreement used in connection with that.
So did it really take the FBI a full year to figure out that Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson also had computers with classified information on?
No. It took us to that point in the investigation to insist that we try to get them.
Were you getting them because they had classified information or because there was some other information you wanted?
No, we thought those were the tools, as we understood it, that have been used to sort the emails. And the investigative team very much wanted to understand, if they could, whether there was an electronic hail of how that had been done. Because the big issue was, what did they delete, what did they keep?
But why did you need an immunity agreement? Why didn't they just cooperate and hand them over? The law firm did, didn't they?
Well, yes. That's a question really I can't answer. That's between a lawyer and her client and the Justice Department lawyers. For whatever reason, her lawyer thought it was in her interest to get an active production immunity agreement with the Department of Justice.
The FBI interviewed David Kendall's partner, but did not interview David Kendall. Why didn't you interview David Kendall?
I don't remember. I don't remember that decision.
Going back to this Reddit post, this is put up on July 24th of 2014. You believe this to be associated with Mr. Gambetta, correct?
Yes, I think that's right.
This is the one that Mr. Jordan put up about the need to strip out a VIP's very VIP email address and a bunch of archived email. This is he's referring to a federal record, isn't he?
I don't know exactly which records he's referring to.
How is this not a conscious effort to alter federal records? I mean, the proximity to the date is just stunning.
Sorry, what's the question?
How is this not a conscious effort to alter a federal record?
Well, depending on what the record was and exactly what he was trying to do, and whether there would be disclosure to the people they were producing it to, saying we changed this for privacy purposes. I just don't know sitting here.
These are documents that were under subpoena. These federal records were under subpoena. They were under a preservation order. Did Mr. Gambetta destroy documents?
I don't know whether that was true in July of 2014. They were under subpoena.
Did he ultimately destroy federal records, Mr. Gambetta?
Oh, I have no reason to believe he destroyed federal records.
He used bleach bit, did he not?
Yeah, the question is what was already produced before he used the bleach bit. He definitely, the reason he wanted immunity was he had done the bleach bit business after there was publicity about the demand from Congress for the records. That's a potential.
And not just publicity, there was a subpoena.
Right, that's potential.
And there was communication from Cheryl Mills that there was a preservation order, correct?
Yes.
And he did indeed use bleach bit on these records.
Sure. That's why the guy wouldn't talk to us without immunity.
And so when you got immunity, what did you learn?
We learned that no one had directed him to do that he had done it.
You really think that he just did this by himself?
I think his account, again, I never affirmatively believe anybody except my wife, but the question is, do I have evidence to disbelieve him? And I don't. His account is credible that he was told to do it in 2014, screwed up and didn't do it, panicked when he realized he hadn't, and then raced back in and did it after Congress asked for the records and the New York Times wrote about them. That was his SHIT moment. And that was credible. Again, I don't believe people, but we did not have evidence to disbelieve that and establish someone told him to do that. No email, no phone call, nothing. The hope was, if he had been told to do that, that would be a great piece of evidence. If we give him immunity, maybe he'll tell us, so-and-so told me to, so-and-so asked me to, and then we're working up the chain.
But he did indeed destroy federal records, and he was told at some point to do this, correct? Who told him to do that initially? When he was supposed to do it in December, and he didn't do it. Who told him to do that?
One of Secretary Clinton's staff members, I can't remember sitting here, we know that. One of her lawyers might have been Cheryl Mills. Someone on the team said, we don't need those emails anymore, get rid of the archive file.
This is what's unbelievable about this, because there's classified information, there are federal records that were indeed destroyed. And that's just the fact pattern. Let's go back to this. Here's the other thing that I've drawn to your attention that is new. September 15th of this year, I issued a subpoena from the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. On these Reddit posts, 4 days later, they were destroyed or taken down. They were deleted. I would hope the FBI would take that into consideration. Again, we're trying under a properly issued subpoena to get to this information. Let's go to Heather Mills real quick. How does in the 2016 interview with Cheryl Mills, she says, quote, Mills did not learn, in the interview report, the interview summary from the FBI, Mills did not learn Clinton was using a private email server until after Clinton's tenure. Back, also, you have this interview with Mr. Pagliano, who said he approached, quote, Pagliano then approached Cheryl Mills in her office and relayed a State Department employee's concerns regarding federal records retention and the use of a private server. Pagliano remembers Mills replying that former secretaries of state had done similar things, to include Colin Powell. It goes then on to a page 10, and this is what I don't understand. The FBI writes, Clinton's immediate aides, to include Mills, Abedin, Sullivan, and a redacted name, told the FBI they were unaware of the existence of a private server until after Clinton's tenure at state or when it became public knowledge. But if you look back at the email from Heather Mills, if you go back to 2010, this is to Justin Cooper, okay? Mills to Cooper, who does not, he works for Clinton's. He doesn't work for the State Department. FYI, HRC email coming back. Is server okay? Cooper writes back, you are funny. We're on the same server. She knew there was a server. When there was a problem with Hillary Rodham Clinton's emails, what did they do? She called the person who has no background in this, who's not a State Department employee, no security clearance, and then tells the FBI, well, I never knew about that. But there's direct evidence that contradicts this. How do you come to that conclusion and write that in the summary statement that she had no knowledge of this?
That's a question.
Yes.
The time of the gentleman has expired, but the director will answer the question.
I don't remember exactly.